I moved to LA to go to grad school in 2017. And at the time I was, kind of thinking a lot about how I had seen the city represented in films and movies and TV shows, and kind of the gap between the city, the experience of traversing the city, and the slick representations in Hollywood films. In LA, there's a lot of fires, there's the climate crisis, the housing crisis. So yeah, there was kind of this big gap for me between reality and the representation. And I used to be a performer, a dancer, and so a lot of my work is very interested in performance. And I had thought about at the time stunt performers, these people that go in for this moment of violence and step out, and we never know who they are because they try to be invisible to look like the actor or the character. And as a result, we feel empathy for the character and the actor, but not for the stunt performer, who's a lot of the time undergoing a very violent situation. So I was just interested in stunts, and I set out to find someone, or to find stunt performers to talk to. And first I found a lot of men, kind of very sort of macho, athletic. Some of them were in the military type of men. And then as I kept searching, a friend of mine who went to AFI mentioned that a woman had come to her class to talk about stunts. So she connected me with Jess. And when I met Jess, I learned, I always thought probably that stunts were dangerous, or stunts were very physical and intense, but I learned through Jess that they're often very dangerous, and what they're doing changes with each set. It depends on the script, it depends on the costume, and it depends on who's in charge. And usually, almost always, it's been men who've been in charge of safety. So there was a lot of issues about gender and power that I learned about through Jess. And then Jess introduced me to Court and Kelly, who are two close friends of Jess's, and they all live together in the same, sharing a backyard in Santa Monica. And they often dirt bike together and surf and kind of do extreme sports together. So I found them to be really interesting people. They're all queer. And so, yeah, when I met them, I knew I wanted to make a film, about them. And then I conducted a series of interviews, and over the course of the interviews, got deeper and deeper into this story. There were other testimonies as well at first by Court and Kelly and their experiences, but yeah, it didn't fit in the film. I wanted to really tell the full story of Jess's testimony, but they're still very important to the filmmaking process and the film itself. Yeah, this story had, and stunts in general really made me think about the violence of representation, that all this labor and all this time and all this this work goes into creating these images, but we don't see any of that labor in the image itself. So there's this drastic gap between them, and the labor condition, and that makes me think about kind of the labor conditions and how they're invisible, and how these images affect us, because we don't know anything about those labor conditions. We just see the images and we see them growing up. when we're born into the world, we're immediately affected by all these images. So they're very influential, but also there's a lot that we don't know about in how images are produced. So yeah, that was just really fascinating to me. And I was working with one of my mentors, Berenice Renaud, and talking a lot about this this concept, the violence of representation. And then it was Godard's film, The Image Book, had recently come out. And he kind of references that quote as well in a different way. Not the same part of that segment from the writing, but a different part. And so, yeah, while I was watching the film, I wrote that down. And then it was a few months later, actually, maybe even a year later, that I remembered it and went back to it and then did the reading myself again and found a different quote. So yeah, it didn't start the process. It was more at the end of the process. I just felt it was missing something at the beginning because there's so much black in the beginning, black space. It's nice to have a little bit of information to look at before we go into this 4 minutes of black. So it started off a little differently as well. I knew because the story, or because what's important to Jess's testimony is that the director wanted to get everything in one shot. They wanted to film the car driving and then diving into water in one shot, which made it much more dangerous than if they had just shot driving and then kind of drop the car in themselves into the water, which is what is usually done. Because it was one shot, there was danger that the car could flip over. So I shot the most important shot of the film, at the ocean and at sunset, so that there was a little bit of change in the film. The light becomes darker. And so that was I knew I wanted to really focus on one shot to echo the testimony. And then I was kind of like wondering after that what to do with the first section. And I thought I would convey the feeling of being underwater. So I actually tried to do some underwater shoots, but it's very expensive and very difficult, and didn't really get very far. Just did a test with the GoPro or something. And then I realized that it was redundant to show the water twice. So I thought it actually worked conceptually the best to focus really on just the one shot and then the lack of the image in the black before. And then the black for me, because it's intended to be seen in a cinema, not in a gallery, so that you sit in the dark and this story unfolds with you, and you feel maybe a sense that you're underwater. It took me a while, a lot of trial and error. At first, I was kind of it kind of made it very heavy feeling. So then I kind of brought it a little bit into like a little bit more of a casual feeling. But while I was working on it, I looked back at this film, Over the Land by Deborah Stratman, because she has this sequence. The image is the sky and different shots of the sky, and we hear the story of this man experiencing having, I think, parachuted out of a plane and being caught in a tree. So it's a very intense story. And the person that is telling the story isn't the person who went through this experience, which is similar to my film, because I performed the testimony. And the person that's telling the story in Over the Land does so in a way where it feels both like it's being read and like it's being told to in everyday life to somebody else, like on the phone or something. So I tried to achieve an ambiguity of feeling of both at certain points, and kind of, yeah, explore that in between space. Yeah, like I said, I grew up a performer, ballet dancer for a while, and then I became or then I started doing much more experimental performance, but rehearsal was still a big part of that, very intense physical training. And so yeah, I've always sort of been interested in the rehearsal process and these this time for training, but also as a kind of ritual. So for me, rehearsal has always been something very kind of special, because you work towards something. You usually perform the same exercises in the beginning of the rehearsal. It's kind of like a ritual space, and it's you're kind of separating yourself from the usual life in this kind of place. So that's my experience with it, and I think it's a really, yeah, it's an interesting place of working with other people, and also kind of working through this repetition. And then in stunts, the rehearsals, I feel like a little bit of that that sense in the beginning of the testimony, like they had to keep repeating and practicing being dropped in the water from a little bit higher each time. And the way the story sort of unfolds is like, you don't expect it to be, you expect it to be very controlled, and it was, for the most part, it is in rehearsal. But then on the day of the shooting, there's kind of this one element that kind of puts everything else into question, which is that they had to do everything in one shot, and that there was a banana turn that went into this ramp, and that type of turn and that ramp made it more dangerous that day. So sort of everything they prepared for sort of became undermined by this one element. That's sort of what I wanted to do, is sort of parse out all the elements that go into this action. And what was I going to say? Oh yeah, and after talking to Court, Jess, and Kelly, that happens a lot with different types of things that might come up the day of the set, because stunts are kind of at the bottom of the hierarchy, and the costuming people don't usually talk to the production people and this type of thing. And so they might get onto set and realize they have to wear super high heel boots when they've been practicing this in their sneakers or something, and that changes everything for the stunt. Yeah, I didn't have a lot of material from set. I did shoot something. I did document a test that Jess and Court coordinated for like a little bit of fire on Court's shoulder, and in very slow motion, so just a few seconds of it. And that's an installation. It didn't really fit into the film, but hopefully I'll have a time to in this space to install it. Sadly, the place I was going to exhibit it was canceled due to COVID. But anyway, so I had that set from set, and then I didn't really have anything else. So I asked them. Kelly was telling me one time about one of her testimonies was one of her stories was this experience for The Exorcist, where she was on this really complicated rig system, and it pulled her from one wall in one corner to the next, so that she would kind of slam against the walls. And that, yeah, she said that it was really complicated and complex, that usually wire systems aren't so, yeah, engineered like that. So she was saying it was an interesting, fun experience, but also like very intense on her body and physical, and she got a lot of bruises and things like that. Anyway, so we were talking about that, and then one time we went out surfing, and she told me like, oh, I have this footage, it's pretty boring, but I'll send it to you. And then when she sent it to me, I was like, oh wow, this is fascinating. Like, there was some footage of her slamming against the walls. I didn't use that. I ended up just using the part where she's practicing with them and including some of the sound of them talking to her, just because I thought it was interesting, her kind of hanging from the wall, not really being able to move on her own. So they had to drag her around. And because they're working together, they're kind of cooperating in an efficient way, and she's wearing her exercise clothes, and you have the sense that they're all like working on the same thing together. And then in the next scene, she has to wear a costume, which kind of immediately sexualizes her and changes everything. So I sort of wanted to include that contrast between her in her exercise clothes and her in the costume. Yeah, and I slowed it down a lot to really focus on the gestures of her and the men around her. And because it was slowed down, I kind of manipulated the sound and included some of their voices and some of the industrial sounds, to sort of create this dissociative feeling. Because for me, I felt the costume kind of dissociated her from herself. It's very meaningful and important for me. Like I said, I come a little bit more from performance and choreography, but I studied cinema, and now I'm kind of, that's what I want to do. This is, yeah, so to be now, to be able to travel with my work and meet people in industry and meet people in these festivals, it's really important for, to get exposure in my work, and I feel so honored to be included in this particular festival. And I think it is, being a part of like these festivals also helps future funding for work. And yeah, I'm very excited to go in person, and I know my film is a little bit unusual in its structure, and in that the first 4 minutes are just in black. So I feel very grateful to being that my film has been appreciated for that. And yeah, the film premiered at FID Marseille. So I was able to go to Marseille as well in July. And that was an incredible experience. I met so many people from all over the world, made many new friends, and saw so many films and talked about film, and learned a lot as well. So I look forward to doing that again.